Hello and welcome to the EL 101 Part 8, Exiting, Monitoring, and Reentering. This module will provide an overview of the processes for the following: exiting English learners from programming, formal monitoring of exited English learners, and the instances where re-entering a former English learner back into the program may be necessary. First, we will cover the qualifications for exiting an EL from services. It is required that all ELs who exit services be formally monitored for 2 years, and these requirements will then be reviewed. Finally, we will look at the process for when an English learner exits and is still demonstrating language needs and would benefit from re-entering the EL program. An English learner is reclassified as fluent upon achieving English language proficiency as defined by the State English Language Proficiency Assessment. In Indiana, this is defined as a 5 or higher overall composite score on WIITA Access. Once this score is achieved a single time, a student will be formally exited from EL programming and enter into a 2-year formal monitoring period. Although the student is now considered a former English learner, the student will be included in the DOE Language Minority Data Collection annually. The student, however, will no longer generate state and federal EL funding. If a student is a first-time enrollee and test is a 5.0 or higher on the WIITA Screener or WAPT, then there will be no 2-year monitoring period and the student is considered fluent upon enrollment. As required per Castaneda v. Pickard and the Civil Rights Act of 1964, local education agencies must formally monitor the academic progress of former English learners to ensure that they are meaningfully participating in the district's educational program in a manner that is comparable to their native English-speaking peers and comparable to other English learners who exited at the same time. This occurs for 2 years after exiting services. The monitoring processes for former English learners are defined locally, but local education agencies must establish rigorous monitoring systems that include benchmarks for expected growth in acquiring academic content knowledge during the academic year and take appropriate steps to assist students who are not making adequate progress. Students in this 2-year monitoring period still have access to all support services through the district's English Language Development Program if needed. However, they are not eligible for state testing accommodations and will not have an individual learning plan. A formal process must be implemented to maintain robust documentation for EL and content teachers to monitor former English learners. Some suggested indicators for monitoring documentation are the following: student grades in all content areas, summative and formative assessment data, including all state assessments, content teacher observations, EL staff observations, teacher observations of student progress in the 4 language domains of listening, speaking, reading, and writing, as well as behavior and attendance data. This list is not exhaustive and should be adjusted to include the most useful and actionable data for the local context. In order to maintain the aforementioned documentation, it is recommended that an LEA utilize a monitoring form to track student progress, and an example is included here. An LEA may choose to use this example form included with this module, or to create its own. If an LEA creates its own monitoring form, it must establish rigorous monitoring systems, including regular discussions and evaluation of student progress. Upon completion of the 2-year monitoring period, LEAs must ensure that former English learners who have been reclassified as fluent have full access to mainstream curricula. Any academic deficits resulting from lack of English proficiency have been addressed and remedied. Any recurring language needs identified through the monitoring process have been addressed and remedied. Former English learners are meaningfully participating in the standard instructional program in a manner comparable to their native English-speaking peers. In some instances, students may meet the state criteria for reclassification as fluent without having truly attained English proficiency. In these cases, formal reentry into the English learner program may be appropriate. Before a reentry process can be implemented, it is important that the following have been addressed. First, has the LEA implemented a rigorous monitoring system for the student based on state and federal guidance in order to ensure students meet expected benchmarks and growth? Next, have targeted interventions been provided to address any academic deficits the student may have incurred as a result of a lack of English proficiency? And finally, has the student meaningfully participated in the standard instructional program in a manner comparative to native English-speaking peers and other former English learners? If these questions have been addressed, then the next step would be to re-administer the VIII screener or kindergarten WAPT in order to determine if the student meets the Indiana criteria for EL eligibility. The LEA must maintain local documentation of all supporting sources of data, evidence of interventions implemented, evidence of the student's eligibility for reentry after re-administration of the VIII screener or kindergarten WAPT, and secured parent or guardian consent. A student who is formally reentered in the English Learner Program should be provided with an individual learning plan, appropriate instructional and assessment accommodations, and access to an effective English language development program. The student will be assessed annually with a state English language proficiency assessment until again meeting the Indiana exit criteria. Note that this process may be implemented for students who are identified as fluent upon enrollment from scoring a 5.0 or above on the VIII screener or kindergarten WAPT. If there are any questions over exiting an English learner, the monitoring process, or reentry into an EL program, please reach out to a member of our English Learner team at the Indiana Department of Education. Thank you.